Hey. Okay, so I wanted to read you some interesting information about how you constantly repeat yourself, so that you don't have to worry about people rioting or worry about the import and export problem. Okay. The Trump and Ukraine scandal is an ongoing political scandal in the United States. It revolves around President Donald Trump trying to convince the Ukraine and other foreign countries into providing damaging narratives related to Russian interference in the 2016 United States election. The scandal insists that Trump enlisted help within his official administration, namely Rudy Giuliani and Attorney General William Barr, to pressure Ukraine to cooperate in supporting the released payment of $400 million of military aid package to allegedly obtain cooperation from Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine. It's interesting that there's this scandal because the whole time Melania is sitting there from the Ukraine just to test the waters. And it's also talking about, is everybody cool that we're actually getting $400 million from them? We'll trade it for some military help, but I really need help in running for president. So they needed the money, and they would trade it for military help because the Ukraine supposedly was having some trouble. Except it would really be advantageous for Donald Trump to get $400 million to help with his campaign. That's what they're saying. On December 3rd, 2019, the House Intelligence Committee published a 300-page report, noticeably 300, like the movie 300, that President Trump acted through agents within the U.S. government soliciting the help of the Ukraine to benefit his re-election. President Trump also conditioned official acts by the new Ukrainian President Zelensky to carry out his demands. President Trump withheld a White House meeting with the Ukrainian president about critical U.S. military assistance for the Ukraine to help fight Russian aggression in the eastern side of the Ukraine. In January 2020, it was decided that President Trump broke federal law by withholding Congress-approved military aid to the Ukraine, which was what was leading to the impeachment trial, which then all of a sudden, they just said he's fine, and they threw out everything. All of that was just to fill out to see if anybody was going to talk about Melania being a Russian. Now this is something that I saw about the Soviet Union, which is basically the bigger side of the Ukraine. It's just like a neighborhood. The Ukraine is just a smaller country inside of a bigger country, which is the Soviet Union. Was the term used instead of Russia? The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Russia is a part of the Soviet Union. People think, so basically Russia and the Soviet Union are the same thing. They just changed it because, for whatever reasons. In 1917, Vladimir Lenin overthrew the Russian government. Noticeably 1917. There's a movie out right now called 1917. Just to see if anybody would say anything. That's weird. Melania's first lady. Is anybody paying attention to what Ukraine is? If they don't say anything, then technically we can just move in a Russian president, right? It's at the theater now, 1917. Vladimir Lenin overthrew the Russian government. In 1922, Russia was formed, which united the Russian Transcaucasia, Ukraine, and Belorussian. Following Lenin's death in 1924, Joseph Stalin came to power in the mid-1920s. Stalin formalized communism, replaced the market economy with a command economy, which led to a period of rapid industrialization. Despite these improvements, significant tragedies also occurred. In addition to drought and millions of agricultural animals died, causing massive animal famine. Political paranoia set in after the rise of the Nazis in Germany in 1933, leading to the Great Purge, resulting in hundreds of thousands of people accused of spying and were arrested and executed without trial. That's something that you can do if it's communism. They just make a name for it, which legalizes it. And that was called the Great Purge. Basically, if you're just somebody that they don't like, the nigger president, for instance, he tells the new Russian president, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, and then they just say, we're going to kill all of you, and then they probably use something along the lines of the Bible. And then a a lot of people all of a sudden just get pulled from their houses and die. In 1939, after unsuccessful efforts to form an anti-fascist alliance with Western power and Soviets signed the non-aggression agreement with Nazi Germany. After the start of World War II, the formerly Soviets invaded the territories of several Eastern European states, including Poland and the Baltic states. In 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, opening the most extensive and bloodiest war in history. Soviet casualties accounted for the highest proportion of the war in the effort of acquiring the upper hand over the Axis forces at intense battles such as Stalingrad and Kursk. In most of the territories occupied by the Red Army after its westward advance, local communists assumed power and formed governments allied with the Soviets. The post-war division of Europe into capitalist and communist halves led to increased tensions with the United States, known as the Cold War. Now, the Cold War is most people don't know what it means. The Cold War is almost a war. It's just tension. It's just, I'm really, really mad at you. That's why it's a Cold War. It's like, it basically, because half of it was good and half of it was bad, there was just this sort of like unacted on anger by the United States. They called it the Cold War, because then there's no treaties and then there's no imports, exports. They just stand and look at each other over the ocean. In 1985, the last Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev sought to reform and liberalize the economy through its politics of glasnost or openness and perestroika, which is reconstruction. These policies caused political instabilities arising from nationalist and separatist movements. In 1989, Soviet allied states in Eastern Europe were overthrown in a wave of revolutions which ended communist rule in 1989. It's like yesterday. Gorbachev's power was greatly diminished after Russian President Boris Yeltsin's high-profile role in facing down a coup d'etat by party hardliners. In late 1991, Gorbachev resigned, and the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union met and formally dissolved the Union. And that's where you get the European Russia, because dissolving it means that it becomes a less harsher government in a European style. The remaining 12 constituent republics emerged as independent post-Soviet states. Russian Federation, formerly the Russian SFSR, assumed the Soviet Union's rights and obligations and became recognized as the de facto successor state. At the same time, Ukraine by law declared that it is a state successor of both Ukrainian SSR and the Soviet Union. Today, Russia and Ukraine have a strong Russia and Ukraine have an ongoing dispute over formerly Soviet property. The Soviet Union produced many significant technological achievements and innovations of the 20th century, including the world's first human-made satellite, the first humans in space, and the first probe to land on another planet, Venus. They're the first ones that made the first satellite and the first humans in space, but I guess Neil Armstrong is the first one that actually landed on the moon, so don't get it confused. The country had the world's second largest economy and the largest standing military in the world. The USSR was recognized as one of the 5 nuclear weapon states and possessed the largest stockpile of weapons of mass destruction. It was a founding permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, as well as a member of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the World Federation of Trade Unions, and the leading member of the Council of Mutual Economic Assistance and the Warsaw Pact. So, that's just in case you didn't understand fully exactly what was going on with the millions of times you heard that President Trump was having trouble with the Ukraine. Melania's from the Ukraine. The Ukraine is sort of Russian, just to feel things out.